All right, so I have my screen open. Let's go ahead and do some examples. I think I'm going to increase the text size for you guys a little bit. Is that the largest that I can do? I think that's the largest I can do. Okay, so let's look at this. We just want some examples of variables. All right, that's the name. So let's look first at some built-ins because that's what we were kind of talking about, some built-in variables. So when I'm looking at the references, there are things that I already have, okay? Just scrolling down, we can kind of see some things. Now these are all functions, but when we get far enough, here, these are some built-in variables. Now we haven't officially talked about these ones, but notice how they're not written in camel case. That's because these we are treating as variables that we never want to change. Okay, the value of pi will never change. Okay, so that is called a constant. Usually we write constants in all in caps. Okay, but let's continue scrolling down so we can see some built-in variables. Here are some built-in variables. Okay, these you most likely are not going to play with because these are specific for when you're using mobile phones and you're trying to code, but you could access the accelerometers and stuff and tell if a phone is tilted or in a different position or it's turning if you want to use that as a type of control or as maybe a type of GPS. We will be playing around with key is pressed, key, and key code in this course. Key is pressed. Notice how that is written in camel case. Now this key is pressed, as you guessed, is holding a value that is telling if the key is pressed. It is holding a Boolean value. It's only going to tell us if it is true or false. Okay, so here's an example of some code using it. Key is pressed. We're checking if it's true. You don't really need to understand all of this code right now. But if I was pressing a key on here, then it would change the color. So this is actually the sketch right here. So if I was pressing a key, now I press the space key, and it keeps trying to scroll down. But if I'm doing, say, D or a different key, it doesn't matter. T, U, V, R, L, okay? If I am pressing a key, so if that is true, then we're displaying, we're coloring that square as black. Otherwise, we're coloring it as white. And we'll talk about color a little later. Okay, now, key is pressed. It just holds a Boolean value, okay? So that is one example that we've seen. Key and key code, we're going to be using those when we're trying to build controls for games. For if we are pressing a key, we're pushing up or down, and we want our character to move up or down. Okay, that's what we can use for key. For key code, that is special for if we're using special characters like the arrow keys or the space bar. Okay. Now these ones you are going to be using. Here's a number of them. Mouse X and mouse Y. That's what we already seen. This is holding the current mouse X and mouse Y position. Then we have P mouse X and P mouse Y. Now this, whoever created this code did not write this all in camel case because that M should have been capitalized. But what is P mouse X? P mouse X stands for the previous mouse position, the previous mouse X position. So if I wanted to use that, I can actually kind of draw lines from the previous position to a new position. So we'll kind of play around with it a little bit, but we can see this right here. It's drawing a line from my current mouse position to the previous mouse position. And the faster the refresh rate, the faster that I move, the longer the lines would be. The faster the refresh rate, the smoother it's going to look. Okay, because I would move less when it refreshes. Okay, so that's P mouse X. Now, chances are, why would they probably do that, a P mouse X instead of P with the capital mouse X. They probably did it because there might be another variable that actually is that it's being used in Chrome or JavaScript as a whole. And so when we're trying to do it on P5.js, we're not able to access it. Okay, not a big deal, but that's why we end up having references, because we can see what those built-in variables are and see what we can use without having to create any code for it. So let's play around with doing the P mouse X, P mouse Y, and the mouse X and mouse Y position for a line. So let's kind of look at that. It's really easy code that we could do. We could just do line, and line, we need for one end, we need the X and Y, and for the other end of the line, we need an X and a Y, okay? Now we could do something like width divided by 2 as let's say, height divided by 2, these are both built-in variables. We talked about the canvas. So if width is the largest X value on the canvas, which in this case would be 400, because that's the size of my canvas horizontally, then width divided by 2 should be the very center in terms of where it is horizontally. And height divided by 2 would be the very center in terms of vertically. So if that's where I wanted the line to start, and then maybe I want it to be lined up, the other end to be lined up with my mouse position, I could write mouse X and mouse Y. Let's check out and see what this looks like. So check this out. So see, one end of the line is like locked in the middle of the screen. Okay, in the middle of my canvas. That's what this is doing. Okay, and then this is actually capturing my mouse position. So as I'm moving, now if I move faster, it looks like it's kind of getting off. That's just because my cursor is not staying up with me. Okay, so the length of the line is actually moving too. This is kind of cool, right? Okay, now I could make this a little bit thicker. So let's say that I wanted to make it thicker. Let's see, stroke width is a function, and I want to do 10. Let's see where we're at. Ooh, I must have made an error. Stroke weight, excuse me. That's why we like references, so you don't have to try to have everything memorized. Stroke weight. All right. Now it's a thicker line, yeah? Okay. Now, what if I wanted it to be able to switch to different thicknesses? I wanted to make it easier. So let's say I had 1,000 lines of code. Maybe I wanted to hold that. I also wanted, let's say a rectangle. Okay, and I wanted that rectangle to start at 0, 0 for the top left position, and I want it to be a size of 50. Let's go ahead and see that. Okay, there it is. There is my rectangle. It's not moving. This one is moving because it's mouse X and mouse Y. Maybe I might want this, instead of being here as 0, 0, maybe I want this also to be mouse X, mouse Y. Let's see what we're doing. Now it looks like it's kind of locked to the mouse, so I can move it around. Okay, it looks like I'm actually animating it. I'm really not. All I'm doing is I'm drawing. That's where this function is. This draw function is technically a loop. It's drawing a background color, recoloring the entire background, and then it's drawing this at whatever my current position is. And then when I finish, I get to the end of this code block, I come right back up to the top, and I repeat the process. So we have this appearance that stuff is moving. But if I comment this out, and I rerun it, really what I have is the line and the square, and it's getting redrawn every single time. So it's still there in the background, but because I'm not drawing a background screen in between each drawing, this gets all kind of crazy looking. Now if I comment this back in, I can go ahead and see it again. It looks like I'm drawing stuff. Now, I could do different things, like let's say I want to store a color. Now, if I wanted to create it as a local variable, so here is a local variable, something that will exist only inside of the draw, I use the let keyword, and let's call it line color. Okay, and I want to store value. So this is my initialization phase. My declaration phase is where I put some value in it, and maybe I want it to be red. Okay, now red can be written a couple different ways. This is one of the ways to do it. And we'll kind of talk about this later on. But I created a variable, and I initialized it, and I declared it. Now I want to use it. I want to color this line and the outside of the square the same color. Okay, we could do that. We can say stroke, and then we can put line color. That should give me the color. Let's go ahead and try that. See, now it's all red. But what if I didn't want everything to be red? I wanted only the line, and I wanted the square to be still colored black. Okay, well, I could have this value right here. I could also put this stroke here because I am basically changing the stroke color, and until I change it again, it's going to exist for everything because we get down to the bottom and we repeat. Okay, so if I wanted to change the stroke for the rectangle, I need to give it another color then. So let's go back to black. So we're just going to say 0. Okay, I can write it like that. Another way that I could write it is actually color 0. That would still work too. Okay, or I could write it as color 0, 0. And we're going to learn like what each one means as we go on, but see how that is different. Now, if I decided that I wanted line color to be a certain color, and then I wanted to change the color, here it might be better instead of me doing this. What if after I display the line, I just use that line color variable again? So I just do line color. But we're still back in the same place. I still have it all as red. So what I need to do is I need to change that variable. I have information in there. I have red stored there. Let's put something else in there. So we can do line color, and we put, let's do green. Now what I'm doing is there are different color channels, red, green, blue color channels. Any combination of those will give me a different color. So if I don't want anything for red, I'm putting 0. I want 255 for green, and I want nothing for blue. So I am changing the value that I am assigning to line color, so I'm putting something new in there. So when this gets called, it's not calling what's here because it's been changed here. It's going to give me a different color. Let's go ahead and see. Check that out. Now the square is green. The outside of the square is green, but that line is still red. Okay. If I wanted to change that, to something else, I could go ahead and do that, just so we can kind of play around and see what we do. If we mix green and blue, what do we get? We get cyan. What happens if we mix red, green, and blue? We get white. Okay. The absence of color is black. All the colors is white. Okay. So that's how we would do the RGB color values. Maybe I might want a little bit of purple, so maybe I might do blue and red. There we go. Okay. So this is how I can kind of do colors. Now, what if I wanted, to do this as more of a global variable? Then instead of doing it here, I can, let's say, get rid of that. I don't want that as a local variable anymore. I want it as a global variable. So I'm writing a comment just so you can see what I'm talking about. A global variable, and I'm going to put it here. So line color now exists for the setup function and for the draw. So that means that instead of me having to draw and change the color here all the time, I can kind of rewrite my code a little bit. Now, I could say that I want my color for my line to always be red when I start my program. Okay, and then I don't need this. Now, draw, remember, is a loop. So it will start out as red, and then as soon as we get to here, it's going to change to purple, and then we'll draw this rectangle as purple, and then we get to the end of our code, and then we're going to be red. So it will happen as a quick flicker. If you look, you're going to see a red line, and then you're going to see these squares. So let's go ahead and see. That was so quick. Let's change the frame rate. I'm going to slow the frame rate down real slow. So what we're going to see now is that we're not refreshing very fast. So now when I'm moving it over, it's a little bit more jittery because instead of it refreshing 60 times a second, it's only doing 5 times a second. So if I did this even lower, down to 1 time a second, did you see how long? It started as red because that was the initial color that it was given. But then once we get here, we switched the rectangle. The rectangle always had a color that we gave it. But once we got to the end of our code, then we refreshed again. The draw was called again in a loop, and it still held the original value here, that purple. So if you look again, I can't update even though I was moving my mouse. So it took a little bit for me to update and have it move around. Within that 1 second time, it was red and then it changed purple. Okay, so that is an example of using global variables. We did an example of doing a local variable. Now let's go ahead and look at this. This would be an example of a global variable. Let's see if we can do a local variable but with the same name so we can see what happens. Let line color. JavaScript will try to correct us. So there's already a red. It says line color was used before it was declared, which is illegal for let variables because we did already have it here. Okay. Now here's something else. If I try to see, the best way, I guess, would be to do it as a local variable, but then try to set the line color here. Let's see what's going to happen. Oh man, we got all kinds of errors. Now, why did we get it? Line color existed only inside of these code blocks. See how there's pairs? There's the start of it. There's the end. There was a color. I can draw, and we'll make it show up for 1 second. I'm going to put it a rectangle over here on this side of the screen. So let's put a rectangle over there. So we'll do, I don't know, let's do 300. So it's over here somewhere. And we'll have it close to the top. And we'll have it have a size of 50. Okay. Now, I want to give it a color. So let's fill that color with, I'm going to use the line color. Let's see what happens. Okay, there's the color. Ooh, man, that was close. So it drew that setup. It existed for that 1 second. As soon as we drew our draw, that's when it errored out and freaked out and crashed on us. And it threw stuff here. So this is a console. This will tell us what the errors are. See right here, reference error. Line color is not defined. Now if I click the drop down, it is going to help me identify where the error is. Okay, catching bugs in code is very common. Okay, it's frustrating, but it's very common. We have to read this and understand what it says. Okay, now this will try to give us a little bit more information, but it's saying line 20, line 20. Okay, that's what this first part is. And this is actually how many characters over from the left. So looking at line 20 right here, I tried calling the variable line color in my draw function, but because line color is not defined in that scope, it didn't exist and it freaked out. But I could do let line color, and let's give it a color. We already know that we made it this color red right here because we were able to use it. But let's give it a different color. Let's give it maybe like a reddish green color. So color, let's do mostly red. So I'm going to do like 230, and then let's do like 80 of green. So it's going to be kind of like a darkish color. Okay. Now it didn't error out for me. It's still going slow. We see that color. What do we got in here? We have the line color, so it's not airing out anymore. I do have a line color. You can barely see it. It looks like it's kind of white. And then for that rectangle stroke that's being drawn right there, it's still purple, but this one is 230/80. Oops, I forgot to put a third variable. So let's put 0 for blue. That was my mistake. There we go. There's orange. Okay, now what do we have? We actually have a value right here. This is a local variable, line color. This is also a local variable, line color. They are named exactly the same. They are doing two different things. When I run this, this will shade that rectangle red. Now that variable doesn't exist. We hit the end of our code. Now we have a new variable that we also called line color. Okay, it's a local variable. It will exist only in this bracket, but because this keeps repeating, we get to see that. Okay, we can put our frame rate back up to 60, or we could just comment this line out, and we get the same effect. Now it's smooth. We didn't see that flickering of the shape. If I did it really quick, man, it's so quick. You see it when I hit play multiple times, but it's literally one frame out of 60 frames in 1 second. Okay, so that is why we want to make sure that we are being consistent. So if I'm going to use a variable line color to define everything, then I probably don't want to do this right here. I don't want to make that local variable. I would want to make it a global variable. So now if I put it here and try to use it, line color is here. Now this is not actually accessing, it's accessing this line color. If I wanted to see what the previous line color was, so this is where JavaScript is trying to help us. Because I used the let keyword right afterwards, it is establishing this value of orange for line color, even though I have stored red in it. Okay. Now if I try calling this line color here, so let's do, we'll just display some text, see what's there. And I'm just going to type line color. I just want to see what we got there. And we need to give it a position, so let's give it, 50, 50. So we're going to have some text. Ooh, what is this saying? Cannot access line color before initialization. It's just freaking out because even though we have it as a global variable, it is having a hard time understanding what I want, okay? Because we're trying to write it with the same name, okay? So you got to be mindful of that for if we're doing global variable. If I got rid of this little piece of code right here, it made it so I wasn't creating two variables with the exact same name, there's no issue. There's the text. It's actually telling me what's stored there. We might want to actually change the stroke on that. So let's just make the stroke black. And let's use a new variable. Let's call it text color. And our text color, we're going to start it with a value. We're going to make it black. And then here we can put the text color. We're going to use text color. We will learn more about colors. And I can also do fill text color, because we can outline it, words, and then we can actually fill inside. So there's that. It's a little hard to read, but that's because the stroke is ginormous. That's 10. If we put that stroke weight down, put it back down to, let's say, 4. See where we're at. That's still big. 1. There we go. So stroke much smaller, easier to read. See, it has those values 255, 0, 255, like what we have for that line color. What do we have for that line color? Well, we got down here. So 255, 0, 255. That one actually says how transparent it is. Okay, so we've kind of walked through. Here's just a reference of what you guys could do doing global and local variables. We even added colors. We did some shapes. We kind of reviewed all that stuff. So this is really a good example and a good stopping place for you guys for your as variables. You guys can use this in other code. Good luck. Have fun.